Hi folks, Seth Leapson here. Thanks for watching my monologue. In these uncertain times, you may be thinking about personal protection. If you are, I urge you to visit my friends at Guns Etc. They'll help you find the perfect protection for yourself and your family, and they can even teach you how to use it. They've been protecting Arizonans for over 33 years, and they stand for the great principles this country was founded upon. Or you can just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back, Friday, January 29th, 2021. Following up from yesterday on the abuse of children by miseducating them, especially in things ugly, like racialism and disunity, but denying them what the good stuff is that we used to have, that we used to get. And not surprisingly, before there was a talk of cold civil wars in America. Indeed, if you want a house divided, a civil war in America, disuniting us is exactly how to get that. Has anyone put one and one together here? When we had a common language of our country and our culture, no matter who we were, so far as what country we came from, or what region, or what religion, or what race, or what ethnicity, when we had a common set of assumptions or love of country and a common set of understandings and common history, an appreciation of our Constitution and civics, we were constituted and more civil. Imagine that. Indeed, when you look back at the causes and surroundings of our hot Civil War in the 19th century, it was all about two different interpretations of our founding and certain moralities, wasn't it? One side thought our founding meant to extend slavery and that there was nothing wrong with it. One side thought our founding was meant to limit it, end it, and that it was a wrong that needed to be righted. And so we would, in Lincoln's words, become all one thing or all the other. Those of us who won, the winning side, read the Constitution one way, the losing side read it another, and thus the house did fall for a time. And here we are, with all kinds of talk of division, all kinds of talk about the needs for unity, all kinds of talk about another kind of civil war in America, and this like never before. And this after a generation of teaching what is effectively the losing side interpretation of our founding that was embraced by the leaders of our 19th century Civil War's losing side. Today we are taught the founding thought slavery a good thing. That's what Alexander Stephens and Jefferson Davidson thought. As Jefferson Davis put it, quote, "We recognize the Negro as God and God's book and God's laws, in nature and how he tells us to recognize him, as our inferior, fitted expressly for servitude," close quote. As Alexander Stephens put it, quote, "The prevailing ideas entertained by Thomas Jefferson and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races, and this was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the government built upon it fell when the storm came and the wind blew. Our new government, the Confederacy, is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery's subordination to the superior race is the natural and normal condition," close quote. Roger P. Taney put it this way: "The black man has no rights which the white man is bound to respect," close quote. Each and every one of those foregoing theories is what you hear about our founding today in America's classrooms, as if that's what represents the founding philosophy. That is the view of our founding today. This is the view of, if not the purpose of, the 1619 Project. But there was another view, articulated most profoundly by the very man whose name was removed from a high school in San Francisco this week, Abraham Lincoln. He put things more like this, quote, "Wise statesmen as they were, they knew, the founders, the tendency of prosperity to breed tyrants, and so they established these great self-evident truths that when in the future some man, some faction, some interest should set up the doctrine that none but rich men or none but white men were entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, their posterity might look up again to the Declaration of Independence and take courage to renew the battle which their fathers began, so that truth and justice and mercy and all the humane and Christian virtues might not be extinguished from the land, so that no man would hereafter dare to limit and circumscribe the great principles on which the Temple of Liberty was built, close quote. Lincoln said this, quote, when Stephen Douglas says he boldly denies that the Declaration of Independence includes Negroes at all, I protest against that counterfeit logic, close quote. Lincoln said this, quote, slavery is founded in the selfishness of man's nature, opposition to it in his love of justice. Repeal the Missouri Compromise, repeal all compromises, repeal the Declaration of Independence, repeal all past history. You still cannot repeal human nature. It still will be the abundance of man's heart. That slavery extension is wrong, close quote. And Lincoln said things like this, quote, our adversaries in the Confederate States have adopted some declarations of independence in which, unlike the good old one penned by Jefferson, they omit the words all men are created equal. Why? They have adopted a temporary national constitution in the preamble of which, unlike our good old one signed by Washington, they omit we the people and substitute we the deputies of the sovereign and independent states. Why? Why this deliberate pressing out of view the rights of men and the authority of the people is very telling, close quote. And this, Lincoln said, quote, now, my countrymen, if you have been taught doctrines conflicting with the great landmarks of the Declaration of Independence, if you have listened to suggestions which take away from its grandeur and mutilate the fair symmetry of its proportions, if you have been inclined to believe that all men are not created equal in those inalienable rights enumerated by our Charter of Liberty, let me entreat you to come back. Return to the fountain whose waters spring close by the blood of the Revolution. Come back to the truths that are in the Declaration of Independence. Do not destroy that immortal emblem of humanity, the Declaration of Independence, close quote. Again, one side believed in the natural rights based on our common humanity as articulated in the Declaration of Independence, and one side believed our Declaration of Independence was a lie. One side believed our Constitution was meant to embrace the first understanding, and one side believed it was meant to embrace the second. The side of the first, in both cases, was bigger than the side of the second. The side of the first, in both cases, won the Civil War. And today we arrive at a national pedagogy that instructs us in the rightness and morality and history of the second side, the second theory, the losing side, the losing theory. And our children are increasingly bombarded not just with that, but with the junk thought that they must dismantle, as the BLM curriculum puts it, quote, the Western prescribed nuclear family structure, close quote. Toddlers are being taught to identify racism and take down cultural building blocks that support it. Kindergartners are given coloring books on transgenderism. The Cartoon Network promotes all of the above, and Teen Vogue teaches the virtues and wonderfulness of communism and Karl Marx. Plato is out. 1776 is out. Lincoln is out. 1619 is in. Ibram Kendi is in. And the philosophy and history of America opposed to Lincoln in his day is in. Meanwhile, all common history and literature is out. As one great liberal historian from Harvard, who worked for John Kennedy, Arthur Schlesinger, wrote in his book, The Disuniting of America, quote, the impact of ethnic and racial pressure on our public schools is troubling. The bonds of national cohesion are sufficiently fragile already. Public education should aim to strengthen those bonds, not to weaken them. If separatist tendencies go on unchecked, the result can only be the fragmentation, resegregation, and tribalization of American life, close quote. One might just say a cold civil war. E.D. Hirsch, who we discussed yesterday with Tevi Troy, wrote it this way in his book on the importance of cultural literacy. Quote, to withhold traditional culture from the school curriculum and therefore from students in the name of progressive ideas is in fact an unprogressive action that helps preserve the political and economic status quo. Middle-class children acquire mainstream literate culture by daily encounters with other literate persons. But less privileged children are denied consistent interchanges with literate persons and fail to receive this information in school. The most straightforward antidote to their deprivation is to make the essential information more readily available inside the schools, close quote. Dr. Hirsch goes on to warn us, quote, intellectual error has become a threat to the well-being of the nation. A truly massive tragedy is building. Schools are diminishing our national unity and our basic competence, close quote. Was anyone paying attention? Well, yes, the left was. As Tevi put it, Hirsch's words are of no moment to our progressive educators. Their interest is not his interest. They do not care about unifying us. Hence, they keep using words like dismantle and destroy. They want us divided. They want a new historical understanding of our economy so as to better affect their agendas. One might say, in short, sadly, they want us stupid. Or at least, quote, denied consistent interchanges with literate persons, as Dr. Hirsch put it. Hirsch also said something else, and this more recently, quote, the idea that identity and ethnicity are inborn and indelible from birth is a false view that leads to group hostility, close quote. Yes, group hostility, as perhaps best seen in riots and property destruction and killing of cops and sitting out things called the national anthem unless it's sung at a Joe Biden speech or inaugural. And if the entrenchment of identity, ethnicity are not inborn, which they are not, then again, as Rogers and Hammerstein put it, our children must be carefully taught to hate. Sad. But if we want to avoid turning up the heat in our cold Civil War, we at least know where the faucets are. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.